time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. It's Workers' Memorial Day, and it's one of the days that I like to spend a little time remembering the folks that I've known throughout the years who have been injured and killed on the job. Many of them senseless injuries, many of the loss of life that I've known totally senseless. And it's kind of one of those moments where you recommit. The old Mother Jones line, mourn the dead, but fight like hell for the living. And remembering those who've been sacrificed just because they got up and they went to work to support their families, to keep a roof over their heads, to do whatever it is that they were doing to make their way in this world, and they didn't go home. And I've known a couple of people over the years who sadly that has happened. And I always think of a truck driver that I knew years ago. A guy who salt of the earth, adopted 8 kids. He and his wife had this huge family, and just one of these guys who was just a fabulous guy. And, worked as hard as anybody you'll ever know. Never missed a day of work. And freak accident, something happened. Nobody gave us an official reason why. Many of us who have driven for years have our thoughts. My problem is I thought it was the braking system in the truck that he was using because of the way that they configured it. But every time, and it's been it's got to be 20 years now that he was killed. I go by that spot on Route 70, on I-78, and I look at that spot and I remember him and I think about his family. And if you've lost somebody on the job, you know what I'm talking about. There's that kind of shock that that could have happened to any one of us. And we've got to do more. We've got to do better to ensure that bad things don't happen. And I remember he was sent out with a set of with a load and an empty trailer and a set of doubles, and the old Freightliner tractors that we used to have. You'd hit the brakes, nothing would happen. You hit the brakes, nothing happened. All of a sudden they'd lock up. And the thought was, and they had these giant big old white steering wheels with no power steering. And the thought, from those of us who, combed over it again and again and again, were that, he did that. He was getting off at the exit to go to the rest stop, and hit the brakes, nothing, hit the brakes, nothing. And all of a sudden on a wet night, they locked up. And he jackknifed, slid, hit the wall, and then directly down into the embankment, nose first, and crushed. Didn't stand a chance. And I still remember his wife coming to the facility. I still remember her talking about what she's going to do now. They had 8 kids. And at the time, we had taken up collections and we had done all those things that you do, but that only lasts so long. And I hope they got a good settlement and they're taken care of, and that they were okay going forward. But still, that loved one isn't there. I've had other people that I've known. A guy was working, digging a ditch and was doing waterproofing, and was literally crushed when the wall that they didn't have secured properly, basically collapsed on him. It's these things, and you talk to people in the building trades, you talk to people in in the construction industry where this stuff is possible. You talk to people in manufacturing. My former father-in-law worked in steel, and he would tell the stories of people who accidentally fell into the giant vats of steel, and they were just evaporated. That you didn't find anything left of them. And how back in the old days it was frequent, and employers didn't care because there's 100 guys waiting to take that job. If you were dumb enough to slip and fall or trip or get knocked over and into the vat you went, well, too bad. And what we did as a country, as a working class, we said no more. We said we want safer working conditions. And you go back 100 years. You go back into the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. You go back to those early factory jobs that were horrible. Poverty wage conditions, deplorable working conditions. Back during the Lochner era of if you're desperate enough and you're hungry enough to work for those peanuts in horrible conditions, that's your right, that's your liberty, it's your freedom. When all it was desperate people trying to feed their kids and putting themselves at risk. And what we did as a country, what we did as a working class is we organized. We said no more. We're going to fight for every working person and make sure that working conditions are safe, that people go home at the end of their shift. And one of the things that I think we've learned during this pandemic, and this is one of those things that I've been talking about for the entire pandemic, we needed a real active OSHA. We needed a federal government that was going to protect workers in the workplace. And what we got out of the Trump administration was none of that. In fact, they defunded the Occupational Safety and Health Administration to the point to where the number of inspectors that they had during the Trump years were the lowest that they'd ever been in the history of OSHA. And people died because of it. Now, granted, we gave them nice names. We threw them praise and maybe some peanuts. Hero, essential. Gave a little hero pay, just a couple of pennies. Got press releases. And then those companies clawed it all back. In fact, I look at Kroger out in Washington State where they closed up shop. Because I think Seattle was the place where they had said, well, if you're going to call these people heroes, you're going to have to give them hero pay. And Kroger said, nope, we're not doing it. And they hightailed out of time. Closing stores down. So much for the hero designation. And for me, this is one of those days where I think it's important to remember and think about your own conditions. Because we're in this moment of a pandemic. An airborne pathogen. Did we do enough to protect workers? I don't believe so. Could we do more? Absolutely. And this is why I think during these moments, it's where we remember those who have passed. And like I said, Mother Jones, mourn the dead, fight like hell for the living. And I'm hoping that tonight in Joe Biden's State of the Union, he mentions Workers' Memorial Day. He mentions the people who have died in the name of just trying to support their families. And I hope that, coming out of this not so State of the Union address, we get policies that are going to make lives easier for workers and their families. Easier to organize in the workplace, easier to fight for safer working conditions, easier to do the things that we know are going to be helpful. Now, I guess one of the big things that's going to come out is the American Families Plan, which I think is a good proposal. I don't see that it's going to have much of a chance of being passed, thanks to having a Republican almost majority. You got 50-50 split right there. And of course, a couple of Democrats who I don't know that would come along. But this is a good idea. Increasing funding for child care so that families can get good, affordable child care. I don't think that's a bad thing. Making sure that workers have paid leave. not a bad thing. Things we should have been fighting for all along. Good things on the education front. Universal pre-K, which we've been talking about forever. And then something that I've been saying for a long time. He's pushing something like $109 billion for free community college. I've said we should go further than this, and we should mandate that community colleges become part of the regular education system, that everyone has to go for 2 more years of mandatory education. And I go, oh, you can't do that. They're adults at 18. They could do what they want. You're right, they can. And if they want to be stupid and they want to do something else, they can do that. But I think you have to then, it used to be 8th grade was the cutoff. You got to 8th grade, now you've graduated. Now you can go work in the factory. And then we said, no, we need to get to 12 years. I'm saying now you need to extend that to 14. You need to get that associate's degree out of the community college. You need to get that trade certificate that you can, you take what you learned in the VOTEC classes and now you're a certified whatever. That you have actual saleable skills and it not put families in a lifetime of debt. I mean, this is the remarkable part. And this is why I think this plan and doing what Joe Biden is doing is important because look, this stuff is popular. This stuff is what the American families have been talking about for a long time. Republicans have been giving lip service. Biden's actually got a plan to go forward with it. And how's he going to pay for it? Simple. We're going to tax the rich people. We're going to undo 40 plus years of supply side voodoo Reaganomics. We're going to undo the conservative, horrible ideas that got us into this mess in the first place of creating the largest billionaire class in history. We're going to undo some of that. We're going to redistribute wealth back the way it was before they redistributed it. And we're going to do that with a sane and rational tax code. And we're going to spend money going after the tax cheats. They believe there's a boatload of money out there. They believe that they can raise, and this is mind-blowing when you stop and think about it. They believe that they can raise $700 billion just from actually having the IRS do its job. Because they think they can raise the taxes to pay for all of these plans by raising the top marginal tax rate, raising taxes on corporate America, raising the capital gains tax, all things that I've talked about for years. And this isn't even going back to where I've been talking about, going back to the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower with the 92% top marginal tax rate. They're simply talking about 39.6. And then they're going after the tax cheats. And it's something that we've needed for a very long time. Because what we've done is we've continually given away. And you look at the tax cuts that the last guy did. $1.9 trillion in money that we just kind of gave away. And, it kind of fizzled. We had a little bump, a little tiny bump. But for the most part, it was just, paying back CEOs and buyback plans and shareholder taking more. Now it's time to say we need to have a broader approach. We need work to matter. We need to reward work and return that reward and that dignity that comes with earning a reasonable wage. That's why, again, I'm thrilled to see some of the plans that are coming out of this. Some of the ideas that we've been talking about on this show for 16 years. The idea that we need to get people good skills. We need to get them good jobs, good union jobs with decent wages, with health care security, with retirement security, with safety. And you do that through policy. I know a lot of my right-wing friends, no, Rick, it's the invisible hand. It's the markets do that. No. What the markets do effectively is they effectively pick winners and losers. A handful of winners and everyone else loses. They effectively enrich the people with the power They effectively enrich the people with the access. We've seen this play out. I look at the fact that Amazon, one of the wealthiest companies in the world, spent $200 million crushing an organizing campaign because they don't want to share. This is one of those opportunities, and I'm interested to see the reception. I'm interested to see how people start looking at government maybe a little bit differently as a partner in setting a net under our feet to give us the ability to go and do great things like my grandparents' generation did. This isn't new. We're not Magellan discovering new territory. This isn't this isn't space exploration. This is stuff that we've done in the past, creating a safety net under people's feet. Making sure that we say, as a society, nobody falls through. And we start with opportunity for kids. We move that right through, opportunity for a higher education, for when adults become the workers of the next generation, that they have the skills. This is smart stuff. And yet all I hear from the right is, well, it's about, I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want you banning a book that no one's banning. I want to continue to call Potato Head Mr. Potato Head. And you're free to do that. You can still find the books that the publisher decided they're not going to continue to print. They're still out there. All that stuff is still available, but it's the shiny thing. It's the thing that we've been told that we've got to follow. All the while, you got a guy in the White House right now who's just showing up doing the job. Just showing up doing the job. Happy as can be about that. And we'll see where these policies go, because ultimately it's going to come down to Republican voters. Do you want these things? Republican voters, do you want your kids to be able to go to college? Do you want them to get universal pre-K? Do you want them to have the kind of future that we all talk about wanting our kids to have? If so, get your party on board. And look, if you don't like the ideas, propose something else that's going to get us to these places. I'd love to hear them. I'd love to hear the ideas. And you can send them to me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Jimmy Williams from IUPAT is going to be here to share some thoughts on Workers' Memorial Day. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
Act went into effect. At the time, it was estimated that 14,000 workers died annually on the job, 2.2 million workers were permanently or temporarily disabled, and 500,000 developed occupational diseases each year. It was estimated that at least 25 million serious injuries and deaths went unreported each year. Many of the standards, regulations, and enforcements OSHA now has have come as a result of intense, continuous pressure waged by the labor movement. The Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union was the first to test out the new bill when they filed a complaint against the Allied Chemical Company in Moundsville, West Virginia in May of 1971. Among the many hazards at the facility, pools of mercury on the shop floor were common occurrences. OSHA issued its first citation against Allied Chemical under the General Duty Clause. The first OSHA standard issued came a year later for asbestos. Today, the AFL-CIO notes that for the year 2015, 4,836 workers were killed on the job. There is only one OSHA inspector for every 76,000 workers, and on average, it would take OSHA 145 years to inspect every workplace in the country. But new rules protecting workers from silica dust and beryllium have been established, as have strong reporting and record-keeping standards. There are stricter coal dust standards and anti-retaliation protections for workplace whistleblowers. The Trump administration is currently looking to overturn all of it. You can take action this Workers' Memorial Day to protect working conditions on the job by finding an event in your area by going to aflcio.org. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So this day, as I said, Workers' Memorial Day, where we remember those who have fallen, our co-workers who have fallen over the years, remember who they were, their families, and then we pledge to make sure that the conditions in the future are such that we don't lose any more. Or as the old Mother Jones frame goes, mourn the dead, but fight like hell for the living. And here to share some thoughts on how we fight like hell for the living, I've asked Jimmy Williams to come talk with us. Jimmy's the General Vice President at Large for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. Jimmy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me back, Rick. It's always a pleasure.
So, this day, we a special day for working people, where we remember those who, got killed on the job. And, I think back to the folks that I know, and I talked about one guy earlier, and just horribly tragic and sad and really harmful to the families, especially the kids who, they lost their father, as I remember. And it's just tragic.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think Workers' Memorial Day, at least in the last 2 years, has taken on such a different meaning in this time with COVID and the crisis that we're faced with the pandemic. And, it's always good to take a pause and remember. I think, we became a little numb over the last, year and a half or so to the sheer volume of people that have been affected by the pandemic and the very nature of their workplaces have been, places where the virus has been spreading. I know in our union, very early in the pandemic, we had two members pass that worked at the same place at the New York City Housing Authority, and were going to work early in the pandemic, and they both contracted COVID, clearly on the job site. Very hard to prove that, but and perished. And there's countless numbers of stories of all the frontline workers in healthcare, construction, grocery store workers, people that have worked through the pandemic and have suffered loss.
The folks that we called essential, the people that we called frontline heroes, those are the people you're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
And this becomes one of those moments where you have to take a step back. And because one of the things I hear a lot from people go, well, we don't need unions anymore, Jimmy, because that's something that happened a long time ago. Because unfortunately, years ago, we were losing 100,000 workers a year. The numbers were staggering. And because unions did their job, because we pushed for sane, rational regulation and government action, and the two of them together brought those numbers down, it's not something that happens as often as it used to, but I argue it happens more than it should.
Oh, absolutely. And if you think about Workers' Memorial Day, it was 1970 that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration was formed. 1970. Yeah. I mean, think of the countless millions of workers in the United States working in the mines, working in construction, working in high-risk jobs before the passage of the act that were just, treated like they were meaningless. And, I think far too often people forget the struggle and then also take advantage or take for granted the gains. And, Workers' Memorial Day is a great day to look back on our history and recalibrate our fights for the future. Because we're going to have to do something with infectious disease. We were caught flat-footed with COVID. Our workplaces weren't safe. Right. And we do need to push hard to make sure that OSHA has a standard for infectious diseases going forward, because this is going to be here for and with us forever.
You're absolutely right. And what we need to do also is we need to rebuild OSHA. We need to refund it. We need to bring in more inspectors. During the last term, during the last president's term, OSHA inspectors had fallen to the lowest number in its history. The number I saw, it would take, I think, 160 years for the current level of OSHA inspectors to inspect every workplace in the country. And you go 160 years to get to every one of them. And as you've said, with infectious diseases, you now can't narrow them out of which might be dangerous and which might not be. With infectious diseases, they all are. So this is something we really need to address.
No, that's for sure. Thankfully, we have an administration that's going to invest and rebuild and, do the things necessary to support the government agencies that need the most help, and that's a good thing. But we do have to push for legislation as well. And we have to make sure that any new and incoming administrations don't have the ability to gut the government agencies that are there to protect the American workforce.
Right. Now, during the heart of the pandemic, we'd had a number of union leaders come on and talk about the work that they were doing to help keep their members safe. And overwhelmingly, you look at, especially in the food production industry, I had a Teamster local come on and talk about how right at the beginning of the pandemic, they had a couple of people get it. They immediately were in a very proactive way, did all of the things to do to keep their members safe, and didn't lose anybody. We're just 15 miles down the road. You had the Tyson plant that lost a whole bunch of people, and half the place was infected. It was a nightmare. And for me, this goes back to another reason why we need strong unions, why workers need to have that voice on the job, and why, looking at what happened at Amazon, why we need comprehensive labor law reform. And, the PRO Act to me is not perfect. I still say we need to repeal Taft-Hartley entirely and go back to the original intent of the National Labor Relations Act. But the PRO Act is a step in the right direction. Do you see any way of us getting there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's front and center, right? And we still have work to do. We have 3 United States senators in the Democratic caucus that still needs to be moved. But the president of the United States has made it a priority, and thank God. For the first time in our generation, or at least in my lifetime, a sitting president has made strengthening unions a priority, even created and announced a task force this week within the White House of his key advisors, including Marty Walsh and including the Vice President of the United States. And it's not just something that was put together to appease unions like it's been done in the past. I mean, it's legitimate. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a struggle for sure. The president also put forth the American Families Plan this week. And these are all positive things for the American family and the American workforce, but it's always going to be a fight and it's going to be a struggle. Nothing's ever easy. Nothing's ever won easy. And we still got work to do to push portions of the PRO Act across the finish line. Will we be able to get through without any Republican support? Probably not. A clean version of the PRO Act. However, if we fight and we push and we demand, we could maybe remove the filibuster, and we could definitely get pieces through reconciliation that can help the American workers and the American labor movement.
No, it's something we definitely need. And the reason I bring this up on Workers' Memorial Day is look, we don't know what the future holds. We've learned lessons from this pandemic. We've learned the lessons of what an ineffective government has done. We've learned the penalties that working people, we've given them nice names, essential worker, frontline hero, even threw them a couple of pennies with the praise, and then immediately clawed it back. I want to make sure that in the future, we're much more proactive in protecting our coworkers and ourselves. The life you might save might be your own. So for me, this day, this moment is about remembering those who have passed, mourning their passing, promising to help their families, but also promising to make sure we don't allow this to happen again in the future.
Yeah, and I think of the countless, thousands of non-union workers that don't have the protections of a labor union on a day like today, because we mourn for our membership, but the most vulnerable are those workers that are working in high-risk jobs without the benefit of a labor union. That's where we need support. That's where we need things like the PRO Act, but we also need an active federal government to clean up those most vulnerable workers that are out there. Our unions do provide the highest level of health and safety training. We do have all of the programs needed to support our membership through hard times like this pandemic and others. But I just think about the countless, millions of American workers that don't have the benefit of a union.
I'm glad you brought that up because, unions get painted a lot of times as narrow self-interest. Oh, you care about your members. And it's true. Unions do care about their members. They want their members to get better wages, hours, conditions. There's no shying away from that. But overall, unions do fight for the betterment of all workers in this country. And I'll fight anybody anywhere to prove that to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll bring up an example within our industry. Way back when, lead-based paint was the way that paint was manufactured and made in this country, and it was a poisonous thing for painters, whether they were in a union or not in a union. And 25% of all the deaths related to lead poisoning was from the painting industry, and we had to fight back then to have lead-based paint removed. And, we're still dealing with that crisis today with people that live in homes that were constructed years and years ago that still have lead-based paint in their systems. And, it's a health risk, but unions fought for everybody when they fought for that, just like the mine workers and the mine health and safety, reforms that were won. That's what unions do. They don't do that just for their membership.
For me, when the conditions rise, they rise for everyone, and unions have been the driver in that. Now, you brought up a moment ago that the Biden administration has put together this task force headed up by Marty Walsh, the labor secretary, and Kamala Harris, the vice president, the task force on worker organizing and empowerment. How do you see that being used and playing out for average everyday working people? Because for me, this is the first time in my lifetime that my government has said that we are not only going to give you the lip service that you have the right, but we're actually going to promote your right and encourage your right. To me, that's a monumental moment.
Yeah, and I think it's twofold, right? Look, if we can't get the PRO Act passed, we have to organize 2022 in the midterm cycle to build a bigger majority. And we have to be bringing our organizing stories to that task force. We have to be bringing the issues to light, and having a voice that can be heard is an exciting thing for the labor movement, but it's incumbent upon us to bring our stories, to bring, the cases of workers that are misclassified in the construction industry forward so that Secretary Walsh and the Vice President of the United States can hear and see and put a face on the real issues that the American workers faced with. I also think there's a big side of this too, that, the Supreme Court ruled, terribly against us for public employees back with the Janus decision. And I know the federal government is going to try to do everything they can to strengthen federal employees' rights too, and promote collective bargaining in the public sector, which is really, really important as well.
It's something we most certainly desperately need. Now, the last line of questioning I want to get to you with, because there's, I know you guys have been on the front of immigrant rights and pushing for dignity and respect for all folks. And one of the things, being in the workplace, the reason that I'm in favor of immigrant rights is because I don't believe we can afford to have people in the shadows. I don't think we can afford to have exploitable, disposable people working among us. So I want them out of the shadows. I want them to have protections, and I want them to be able to blow the whistle on bad employers. You guys are in the middle of that mix, and you're calling on the Biden administration to protect those immigrant wage theft whistleblowers.
Yeah, we have been really at the forefront of the immigration battle, and things got stalled under Trump because there was just not going to be any sort of action. But, some of this stuff is important, and being able to create things like deferred action for workers that speak out against their employers so that they can be whistleblowers is important. And having the Department of Labor working closely with the Department of Homeland Security so that it's not one of these where they point to the other and say, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, no, there is. And having that interagency work is really important so that workers can come forward. On Worker Memorial Day, I think it's important to recognize the contribution that the immigrant workforce has brought to our country. And quite frankly, and sadly, it's the most easily exploitable workforce and the ones that are working in the most danger, at least in our industry.
Right.
And so we've been extremely, vocal and supportive of saying early in this administration, let's give those workers their voice. Let's have them step forward outside the shadows, get deferred action, not be afraid to speak up, because it's the employers who are abusing them.
No, you're absolutely right. And look, we want the highest standards possible, the best wages, the best working conditions. And when you have people who are exploitable, it tears that down, and we can't have that. I believe we need to pull people out of the shadows, give them rights on the job, and make conditions better for all of us. Because sadly, and I've worked with a number of immigrant rights folks who have told just horror stories about the kind of work that they do. In fact, there was one point where I was going to go down and pick tobacco in North Carolina. We couldn't arrange it for a whole bunch of reasons, but I was going to go down and spend a week with these folks. But the horror stories of the conditions and being covered with these covers and pesticides and just horrible stuff that you or I would never allow to have happen are happening to these people simply because they're exploitable.
Rick, if anybody's listening and wants to learn more on the subject, go to our Twitter account, go to Go IUPAT and watch some of the videos that we put out this week around worker misclassification and what the immigrant workforce in the construction industry is up against. Some of it's gut-wrenching, and some of it will definitely motivate you to maybe change your line of thinking when it comes to how we treat immigrant workers.
No, you guys have done a fantastic job. I mean, you guys have been on the forefront of drawing attention to this. So the question that comes into it, because, your membership has been painted as somewhere, in the middle, divided. How do you get, how do we get people on board with this? Because immigration is one of those hot button issues. There are folks who think we shouldn't allow people in, slam the door, throw the ladder down. How do you bridge that gap?
You certainly don't run from it. And I've seen unions that have run from it, and I think it doesn't help their agenda. You have to take the issue to the membership. You have to explain to the membership that the enemy is not the worker, that the enemy is the employers. It is the system above the worker. Our membership is no different than any other membership within the construction industry. They are torn on it because they want someone to blame. Donald Trump played off of that, and thankfully, those days are over for him. But the feelings still exist inside of our membership, and we just don't run from it. It's continuous education, it's constant communication, I do have hope that the younger workforce in this country doesn't have those same types of beliefs. And if we can continue to promote and become more diverse as a union, then we can get past some of those divide issues that happen, and we believe that.
Yeah, you guys do really good stuff, and I do hope folks will check out your Twitter account. We'll get links out so folks can take a look at that. Also, the website IUPAT.org. We'll get links out so folks can take a look at that. Jimmy, keep up the great work. I love having you on the program. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks again, Rick.
I'd love to hear your stories on this Workers' Memorial Day. Did you lose someone on the job? So shoot me an email, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'd like to hear your story. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the American Federation of Hosiery Workers merged with the Textile Workers Union of America. Hosiery workers had begun organizing as early as 1909. By 1923, the American Federation of Full-Fashion Hosiery Workers, as the union was originally called, had affiliated with the American Federation of Labor. Women made up the majority of those employed in the industry. Competition within the industry was fierce and a major focus for the early union. From its founding, the union was known for its progressive stances. It focused not only on contracts, but also on social welfare programs such as pensions and health insurance. During the Great Depression in 1933, the union pushed for the founding of a low-rent housing project in Philadelphia. The result was the Carl Mackley Houses, a subsidized governmental housing project. The union operated a nursery school for residents of Carl Mackley and the surrounding community. When the Congress of Industrial Organizations broke off from the AFL, the Hosiery Union left with them as part of the Textile Workers Organizing Committee. In the spring of 1937, Pennsylvania hosiery workers held a sit-down strike. The strike was led by Emil Raid, a Polish-American worker who had joined the union when he was only 15 years old. The strike grew to include 50,000 workers and shut down the Pennsylvania hosiery industry. The workers won raises between 8 and 10%. In 1947, the hosiery workers decided that they did not want to pay the dues increase required by the CIO. They left the organization and re-affiliated with the AFL. Finally, in 1965, changes in the industry led the union to merge with the Textile Workers Union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big news today, all over the CNNs and the MSNBCs and all over the place, the Fox News is even. Rudy Giuliani had his apartment and his office raided by the FBI looking for electronic devices. Understand, Rudy's done some shady stuff. And people are looking into it, and get used to it. We're going to see a lot more because even if you go beyond his work with the Ukraine, as my friend Bob Ney loves to remind me, Rudy Giuliani and his firm did work for the MEK, the Mujahideen cult, while they were on the terror list. But hey, it's Rudy, America's mayor. So maybe there's some who will give him a pass. Someone who I know who will not give him a pass, our good friend Jared Yates Sexton. He is the host of the fabulous podcast Muckrake. Also has written a terrific book, American Rule: How a Nation Conquered the World but Failed Its People. We'll get links on how you can check that out. Jared, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. I'm feeling a little like I might not be able to make it through this segment. I'm so disappointed that Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor, who has always been such on the up and up, Rick. Like, it's incredible that this guy might have gotten entangled in something. I don't know if maybe he didn't know what he was doing. He was just trying to fix an election and also have foreign actors interfere in an election. It seems like he had the best in heart. This seems like a big mistake, Rick.
No, I'm not buying that. But that's what we hear, isn't it? He's the guy who took down the mob. And yet here he is tied up in a mob kind of scheme, isn't he?
Yeah, it's always weird how the people who take on the mob somehow or another end up acting like the mob a lot of the time, and they're kind of trying to push the mob off their corner of the block. I mean, Rudy Giuliani has been pulling these stunts for the longest time. And the thing is, eventually it just kept going and going and going. And like you said, he's been involved in some dirty business. I mean, some real dirty business. And to try and interfere in a presidential election by trying to work through organized crime in Ukraine and Russia just to try and overthrow an election. I mean, this thing was a long time coming. It really was. And you have to think with somebody like Giuliani, if they're not completely in the cups or they're not just completely delusional, they have to expect that knock on the door at some point, because this was playing with fire for years.
Yeah, I had a bunch of people right away going, how can they possibly do that? He's the president's lawyer. There's lawyer-client privilege. And I say, yeah, that's true, unless he's complicit in the crime, unless he's the criminal doing it, then that's all out the window.
Yeah, it was something, wasn't it? I'm thinking back now. I don't know if enough time has passed that we've all forgotten Donald Trump's second impeachment. This was the guy who brought Donald Trump into the impeachment, who came up with this crazy scheme that brought Trump along. And you could tell that Trump had like no idea what was real, what was false, what was a lie, what was true. And Giuliani just kept going and going and going. I mean, this was pushing the envelope in a way that it was inevitable. And to see it happen now it's shocking, but it's not surprising.
Now, the message that I'm getting from the right is, well, this is just, or as Rudy's legal lawyer said, this is legal thuggery. That I had one guy tell me this is what the left was claiming Donald Trump was going to do to Hillary. And I'm sure he tried. But this is what the left is doing, what they claim the right was doing. And they're going after a former president. Are they going after a former president?
I have no idea, but I'll tell you what, Donald Trump is going to test the maxim that former presidents don't get prosecuted. Because, I mean, I'm sorry, it was 4 years of reckless grift and greed and everything. And that's the thing about Donald Trump. He was so artless in his corruption. It was so, I mean, like, he would go on TV and tell you he was being corrupt and that he was breaking the law. I mean, the fact that he has tried to see what a person can get away with the office of the president, like, it's incredible. And I have to tell you, the Justice Department does not want to go after a former president. The Justice Department does not want to go after Mr. Mayor or the lawyer or attorney for a former president. They forced this. They made this happen. I mean, at all costs, they made this happen.
Yeah, Rudy's going to have an interesting next year or two. And the fact that he's being named in lawsuits that are like, like gazillions of dollars by the two voting companies, and I mean, his troubles are not going to end anytime soon.
Yeah, what is it? His old associate Roger Stone used to say, it's his time in the barrel. I mean, he is deep, dark in the barrel right now. And I have to tell you, I've talked to enough people who have covered the Giuliani beat. He has left behind enough damning evidence over the past couple of years that, I mean, if people just start picking it up off the street like pennies, he is in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Well, I'm good for him. Good for him.
He earned it, Rick.
He did earn it. I'm right there with you. Speaking of earning it, your state of Georgia, evidently there's federal hate crimes have been charged against the three guys who I guess were driving around shooting this black guy, Ahmaud Arbery. But now they're charged with 3 federal crimes above and beyond the state crimes. Thoughts?
Well, first of all, the whole thing has been sickening from the very beginning. And, this is something we've talked a few times about this. The American right, particularly because they're animated by white supremacy and the protection of capitalism through white supremacy, they have gone from dog whistles to bullhorns. Right. And in all of this violence, whether it's vigilantes in the street or whether it's law enforcement stepping on somebody's neck, this stuff has become more and more blatant and more aggressive. This was another situation, again, that is surprising but not shocking, right? Because this is something that we've been building towards, which is open violence. And we've seen it in America before. I mean, we've had, epidemics of lynching. We've had vigilante violence. We've had paramilitary groups in the streets and in people's homes. It was unfortunate that things like this were inevitable, but they really were, particularly with the persuasion on the right.
Yeah, but what you hear from the right is that that everything now is white supremacy. That everything is now this extreme. And I look at this and I'm going, I don't know what else to call this when 3 white guys chase down a black guy who's just jogging in a neighborhood and they execute him. I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know what else to call that.
Yeah, one of the basic tenets of white supremacy is the idea that African Americans and people of color are constant sources of potential violence. I mean, this is one of the things, if people want to understand this is one of the reasons why the NRA has become one of the major influential organizations in the United States of America, and why we can't do anything about mass shootings. Because this is an organization that is partnered with the Republican Party to convince white people that they need these guns because at any moment they might need to fight a race war or protect their family from people. And it has gone from the idea of protection to offense, going out and looking for problems and policing, much like the old slave patrols were, fugitive slave patrols were. I mean, this is an American tradition. That's the sad truth of it. What we're dealing with right now is nothing new, but in the light of day in 2021, it's ugly. It's documented. We have our cell phones. We're watching this stuff, but this is not new. This is America's legacy, and it's not a thing that is emerging, but it is a thing that is starting to get worse.
Yeah, on the gun issue, I had always said if you want to start seeing some of these gun nuts, start talking about regulation, I say just start arming every black person, and you'll see them change their tune. And look, I remember seeing the video of like 1,000 black guys carrying, what was it? We got their AR-15s or whatever their costumes were, walking up Stone Mountain, Georgia. That was a powerful moment.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember this, but this was right around 2008 to 2010. Fox News showed members of a Black liberation group who were using their Second Amendment rights to open carry, and it led every show for months, if not years. And this is where they give up the game. Right? Because what it is it's about, no, certain people should be armed. And by the way, let's go ahead and take that to its logical conclusion. Only certain people should vote, which I think we've seen this too. Even the National Review is like, oh, maybe we don't need more people voting. We need better people voting. Right. And by the way, like, this is nothing, again, that's new. This is a resurgence of Jim Crow. Right. This is old American white supremacist tradition, which is all about maintaining political power, but also economic control. And the fact that all of this is starting to come up and it's all starting to grow more and more aggressive should tell you where we are in this country.
Now when I brought that up, I had a black friend go, no, that's a bad idea, because then that's going to give them a reason to gun us down. And I didn't think about it in that way.
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is, it's really easy sometimes, and this is the Republican trap. We've seen this for years, right? Which is, oh, they're doing this, so we should go ahead and have our own version of this. I noticed it a few months ago. Our listeners started talking about all of these Republican blogs and individuals who are like, maybe we need our own country, right? Maybe we should just go ahead and split and have two countries. And Rick, I haven't read a history book in a couple of days, but I saw what happened in the middle of the 19th century. And I have to tell you that when one country separates into another, they don't just separate. They go into separate corners and then they come out swinging.
Right.
So this is one of those things that we have to be very careful about, because they are engaging in bad faith politics, and that can lead us down a really insidious road.
Now, the scary part about this, to highlight what you're saying, is we just saw it was apportionment day the other day. Now we're seeing this southern shift in political power. 7 more congressional seats are being taken pretty much from the industrial Midwest, that used to be the economic powerhouse, and moving its way into southern control. Politically, we could end up having a much different world in a couple of years.
Yeah, and you're talking my language here. I come from Indiana. I currently live down in Georgia. My family are factory workers, laborers, miners, those types of things. What we have seen is largely an industrial shift. Down in the South, they basically have written blank checks to corporations and business owners that said, come down here, you're not going to have to worry about unions, you're not going to have to worry about regulations. Matter of fact, we're not even going to make you pay taxes. Right? You're just going to come down here and live high off the hog. Well, guess what? People go where the jobs are. And the fact that those people have not been protected, they have not been advocated for, and basically in the two-party system, more or less for years, has led to a demographic shift that is really disturbing. And I think this is one of the things that we're going to have to focus on the next few years, which is a realignment of industry, a realignment of union solidarity movements. And we have to. We have corporations at this point that are not just monopolies, but they are like super monopolies, right? That are taking advantage of all of these things that the right has been pushing in their battle against organized labor and solidarity for years. So we're definitely seeing the numbers change. And a large part of it, I think, has to do with that.
No, you're absolutely right. But, this is where I've been saying, the Democratic Party, basically abandoning working people from, my entire life. Has been a bad thing, and that's why I'm glad to see Joe Biden is at least making some moves to try and strengthen labor laws. Because look, if we can't organize the South, especially as this economic shift and political shift happens, we're quickly going to move into a kind of fascist country that most, I think, right-thinking people should be afraid of.
Yeah, and let's just dip back into history and then jump forward a little bit. We don't spend a lot of time looking at the Civil War and why it happened. We like to do a little bit of paragraph and then talk about all of the battles. But one of the reasons that it occurred was because of shifts in terms of labor and economics. And what you ended up having in the South was not just a stratified hierarchical racial society, but a stratified labor society. Right? Where people were being held down, they weren't being paid anything, they weren't being taken care of. These things happen in cycles. But I think you and I talked, I want to say it was back in December after the election was finally decided. And we were talking about what Joe Biden could possibly be and what we expected out of this presidency. And, a lot of people have said to me, I didn't know Joe Biden was so progressive. I don't think he's progressive. I think that Joe Biden knows where the wind is blowing. And what we are seeing, and by the way, we're taping this before he gives his speech tonight. One of the things that, or maybe we're live, I don't know how things work. And so he's going to give this speech tonight. And you and I both watch Democratic presidents talk about, well, we would love to give money to things, but we can't. We just can't. We're in an age of austerity. The age of big government is gone. That's done. We don't live in that era anymore. Right. And even somebody who has been a moderate Democrat, and by the way, Joe Biden, folks, has been a friend of big businesses, corporations, banks his entire life. He was the senator from Delaware, yes, of all states.
Yes.
He's not doing this because he's feeling like he wants to hand things out to people or he wants to bring back the era of big government. It's a necessity. this country will fall apart if we don't push back against exactly what you were talking about, that rightward shift in our economics and politics.
No, you're spot on. And I said it before. He was my fourth choice, maybe fifth. I'm not really sure. I'm still, he's right there in that, fighting for fourth, probably fifth. But he's rising to the moment. I think you're right. He's seeing what's going on, and he's adjusting to it. And I'm glad so far that he has. Now, some people saying he's not going far enough. I'm thrilled with how far he's going, and we need to push and make sure that he can. Because here's at the end of it, I do believe it comes back down, do you make people's lives better or do you make them worse? And I think if he gets an infrastructure bill pushed through, we get the $15 an hour minimum wage, at least on the federal level as he's done, I think you're going to help make people's lives better. And then you make that argument of, do you really want to go back to what we had before?
Listen, I'm just thrilled we have a president who's not considering throwing a nuclear bomb in the middle of a hurricane.
Right.
I'll be real.
Yeah.
But I will go ahead and I will say, and we've known this for a while. This has been an argument that people on the left have been telling Democrats for years. Stop being afraid of leftist progressive ideas.
Yep.
They're popular. And right now, Biden's popularity, it reflects the fact that helping people, making the government work for them, and ending the giant suck of redistributive wealth from the bottom to the top, and like actually returning something to the people and making this country a little bit fair, a little bit more human, there's a real possibility that fire will catch on. So the idea of moving further left and making that progress happen, it starts by those little victories that make the Democratic Party, who, by the way, they're like a scared little animal. They need to be coaxed out from underneath the bed, and they need to understand it's okay to go back to your roots and to go back to taking care of vulnerable populations and organized labor and solidarity. Once they realize that, there is always a possibility that they could go farther. And I'm with you. Right now, this is an encouraging beginning.
Yeah, it is. I like the way you put it. I like the way you put it better. It coaxed out, as where I'm saying you need to boot them out into the middle. That's where we'll go. But Jared, always great talking with you. I always appreciate your thoughts and your insight. Thanks so much for your time.
You're the best, Rick. Thanks, man.
Good stuff, Jared Yates Sexton. Make sure you check out his podcast, the Muck Rake Podcast. Also the book, American Rule, How a Nation Conquered the World but Failed Its People. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at that, and hopefully you pick it up. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1971. That was the day the Occupational Safety and Health Administration was founded. Since then, OSHA rules have become a powerful tool for the protection of workers' health and safety. Before OSHA, 38 people died on the job each and every day in the United States. April 28th is recognized around the world as International Workers' Memorial Day, or International Commemoration Day for the dead and injured. It is a day of mourning to remember all those who have been injured or lost their lives on the job. It is also a day to renew our commitment to the enforcement and strengthening of workplace safety standards. In 2012, Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis spoke at the Workers' Memorial Day commemoration in Los Angeles. In her speech, she recalled working conditions before OSHA, saying, "If you worked in a factory, you might lose your life or limbs in a heavy piece of machinery. There was no federal law requiring safety shields to prevent amputations. If you didn't like it, they told you to quit." But Secretary Solis also discussed the work still left to do for worker safety, saying, "Every day in America, 12 people go to work and never come home. Every year in America, nearly 4 million people suffer a workplace injury from which they may never recover. These are preventable tragedies," she said, "that disable our workers, devastate our families, and damage our economy. American workers are not looking for a handout or a free lunch. They are looking for a good day's pay for a hard day's work. They just want to go to work, provide for their families, and get home in one piece." For many, the motto for today comes from Mary Harris, who commanded workers to mourn the dead but fight like hell for the living. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Why all this hoopla about Earth Day? Grump the barons of big oil and other corporate plunderers of our natural resources? But the global demand to save the Earth is not hoopla. It's an imperative struggle for human survival. And the day does not just celebrate a planet, but the feistiness of the human spirit, the tenacity of millions of everyday Americans committed to the ethic of good stewardship. People like Diane Wilson of Seadrift, Texas, a fourth-generation shrimper on the Gulf Coast. She's the personification of persistence, having spent 40 years battling the raw greed of Formosa Plastics, a Taiwanese chemical giant whose gross pollution has devastated the fishing ecology and economy of Gulf waters in her home area. And, hallelujah, last August, Wilson's indefatigable spirit prevailed, for she won the largest private citizens' lawsuit in U.S. history against an industrial polluter. She's getting no time to savor the victory, though, for another multi-billion-dollar polluter named Max Midstream is attacking this same fragile ecosystem. Max proposes to dredge a deep channel through Matagorda and Lavaca Bays so massive oil tankers can reach a new, huge crude oil terminal that Max intends to own there. A channel that would plow straight through an underwater Superfund site, unearthing deposits of deadly mercury that aluminum giant Alcoa had carelessly dumped there for years. But look out, Max, here comes Diane again. She's putting her own health on the line with a hunger strike to draw attention to the profiteering maneuvers of this latest corporate plunderer. She's petitioning President Biden to cancel Max's dredging permit. This is Jim Hightower saying, to sign her online petition, go to bit.ly/stop dredging. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, President Biden exceeding an hour so far of the not-so-state of the State of the Union. And look, I like Joe Biden a lot. I do. You need to cut this a lot shorter. I'm a supporter and you're losing me. Just saying, love some of the ideas. Good. You're not Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. Make it short, make it sweet, get to the point. And go back to work. Just my thought. Let's wrap it up. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the beginnings of the big speech. I've asked our good friend Harvey Kaye to come talk with us. Harvey is a professor of democracy there at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. He's also the author of The Fight for Four Freedoms, Take Hold of Our History, FDR on Democracy, and of course, Thomas Paine and the Promise of America. Harvey, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. I thought maybe by now he'd have been finished so I could digest it a bit.
I thought so too. I thought this was going to be quintessential Joe. Get to the point, get in, get out, on to the next thing. Still going. I guess this will put any of the Sleepy Joe comments to low energy comments. I mean, he's going like the Energizer Bunny, just going.
Yeah, that's true. I kept worrying that maybe in the absence of Fidel Castro in the Western Hemisphere, who was famous for like multi-hour speeches, that he was just starting. But besides the question of how long he's speaking, I'll tell you, I think there's just too much in the speech.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like everything got thrown into this speech. And maybe that's a consequence of the fact he didn't give an earlier address to Congress.
Yeah. Where
he could have spoken of the rescue plan, that stage one, relief. If we think back to Franklin Roosevelt, you had relief, you had reconstruction, you had reform, you had recovery. You had like 4 different R's going at work. And tonight, it's as if it's just, my God, it's just all thrown in. I mean, there are some really good points. I mean, I'm sure you and I agree that you bet pass the PRO Act. Absolutely. Healthcare should be a right. I mean, these are really good points that he's making along the way. The problem is, number one, I'm not so sure he can enact any of these things because of the opposition. You know, we say Manchin, we say cinema. Look, do we know for a fact what those Delaware senators will do on a lot of these things? I mean, they voted against $15 minimum wage. Fortunately, Biden has decided, at least on federal contracts from now on, as a consequence of an executive signature and executive action, we'll see that kind of thing. But seriously speaking, I mean, he knows and we know, the question is, what's he going to do about it? He knows and we know that there are two absolutely essential bills that must be passed into law. The first one is the For the People Act. I think that is absolutely crucial, because if they want to hold on to some of these seats that they've picked up, and I think about the Senate seats and some of the congressional seats, they're going to have to make sure that people have the right to vote and are guaranteed that right to vote.
Right.
That's first. And then the PRO Act. I mean, you and I know the only way we're going to truly reduce inequality in this country is not by finally passing a $15 minimum wage. $15 minimum wage is it's just not going to work as a way of truly reducing inequality. It will lift the bottom. Absolutely. But to reduce inequality, to finally go after these corporations that have stolen, I mean, there's no other way to look at it. If you think about what the minimum wage should be, $23 perhaps, and what it sits at right now, we're talking about wage theft on a grand scale over these last few decades. So anyhow, he didn't give us any, you know what I was looking for tonight, and all these points he makes are all well taken. But as I said, there are just too many of them. Yep. People are going to literally fall asleep or turn off, and it's not going to work as it should.
No, I did. I kind of tuned out about 20 minutes in. Because it then became, it was long. I'm of the mindset you got to have your marching orders. You got to have, this is what we're going for today. Get people on board, get moving. But it seems like we got a lot of boxes to check off. We got a bunch of subgroups. We got a lot of things. We got debts to pay.
Yeah, I think he could have looked back at the success of the rescue plan. And he could have done that in 3 to 5 minutes. Bam, bam, bam. Just make your point and go for it. And then turn to the next question, the jobs plan, and associate the jobs plan to the imperative of securing the end of the filibuster, which he won't say in this speech tonight. If he did, I missed it. If he does, I'm missing it now. But we have got to figure out how to get beyond this obstructionism, which we used to associate only with the Republicans. And now we know the greatest obstructors are actually some corporate Democrats. So I would have liked this. I know that he wouldn't do it, but I would have liked him to have actually pointed fingers, or I would have liked him to have said, we are all in this together. And now it's your job to go on the phone, on the internet, whatever means you have, to communicate to Congress, House, and Senate, your representatives, that they have got to move on these things. He's already said, we can't wait, over and over, we can't wait. Now is the time, you might say. Well, now is the time if he requests a massive mobilization of energy on the part of the American people to make it possible to pass these into law. In a few months' time, we may find that we've done nothing ultimately, that we've passed a minimalist jobs plan, that the PRO Act goes nowhere, that, I fear that. And I think it's a shame that he didn't take advantage of tonight to really sort of make that point.
No, and if that happens, if we see a minimalist infrastructure plan where it's just about roads and bridges, that will have some boost, but it's not going to have the kind of transformational change we need. If that is the case, I think Democrats get slaughtered in 22.
Yeah, again, if they don't, it's only because we underestimate the degree to which people truly found Donald Trump, the majority of us, an utterly vile character, and the Republicans as, if you like, his toy boys and girls. The fact, there may well be that kind of basic disgust on the part of the American people
Yeah,
towards
but here's the
Republican
thing. I mean,
Party.
the Republicans are doing what they've got to do in states like Georgia, trying to figure out how to get those angry people to not be able to vote. I mean, this
Yeah.
again goes back to your point of the For the People Act, opening up people again having access and a right to the ballot box. They're doing everything they can do to block that box.
You know, I think I think based on what he says, he knows. I think he actually, I looked at the text of the speech since I wouldn't see the rest of it. I found it online. And he called this moment an inflection point, at least regarding climate change questions. Well, this is an inflection point as well in terms of whether or not American democracy and American public life can recover from 45 years of what I've already said to you many times has really been inside a class war from above against working people. And I don't mean just white working people. I mean working people in all our diversity.
No, absolutely. And
So this is the time, and the tragedy is that the Democrats did not figure out how to take more seats in the House and win the Senate without having to go into overtime on the election, you might say.
No, and
So
that's
I worry.
it's a problem, and the fact that you do have a handful of centrist Democrats who are not going to move on a lot of this stuff because, well, they're in safer areas.
Yeah. Now, having said all this, I want to say there were again those moments that really struck me. One of the things that I think is important is when he talked about 4 years more of sort of public education, and he used the word public, and that to me is imperative.
Right.
So he's talked about public community colleges, but he also talked about public, what we sometimes or have often thought of as preschool for 3 and 4 year olds. And we have to remember this should be public, which means this: no going to the private sector for low wage preschool teachers in private settings. This has to be an enhancement, an expansion of public schooling, so that for a start, they're going to get paid in what in most states would be a good union wage for teachers, and in other states, at least a better wage than they're going to pay any sort of, unprepared preschool, babysitters. It has to be public. And I'm glad he used the word public. That to me was really important.
No, and the community college plan. I've been talking about this for years. We're at a point in this time in our history where 12 years just isn't enough. You're not coming out of high school prepared. You ask any employer, the average 18-year-old is not ready for the workforce. They need some additional skills, some additional training. The 2-year minimum to me sounds like a minimum we should be talking about, and figuring out how we make sure that we get we get people the ability to go on beyond that 2 years.
Right. Another thing, which again I haven't seen the full text, but the other thing is that many of these programs we really do have to make sure they're not means tested. Okay, that we don't have a cutoff line that if you make $1 more than a certain amount, you're not going to be eligible for this support. It has to be. These have to become universal programs. Roosevelt understood that all the way back to the American Revolution. Thomas Paine, who first proposed Social Security kinds of programs, knew that. You cannot have it that you're only eligible if you make under a certain amount of money.
No, because then everybody's in, even the rich people who are going to want a better benefit, and they're going to raise the. I mean, it's just common sense.
Don't let anyone call it charity.
No, and it's just like, it's the reason that I'm for a single payer system. Everybody should be in one giant pool. In basic insurance pooling, the bigger the pool, the lower the risk. It just makes common sense that everybody in one pool, everybody rowing in the same direction to get the best benefit possible. And if everyone's in, we push for the best benefit possible.
Right. Can I just ask you, because you may have caught something I didn't, did you hear anything more about the new CCC?
I haven't heard anything yet.
I hadn't either.
I'm waiting. I'm hoping. I keep checking the text. But I'll tell you, when he talked about the American Jobs Plan, the blue collar blueprint to build America, I love that. I think that's a great image. I mean, we're going to get blue collar, dirty hands people back to work, people like me. It's a great thing. He said Wall Street didn't build this country. The middle class built this country, and unions built the middle class. Look, we got none of that from any of the past presidents, and I actually think he believes it.
Yeah, when he signs the executive order demanding a $15 minimum wage on all federal contracts, I hope he includes in all federal contracts a right to organize and bargain collectively. That to me would show a commitment beyond the rhetoric.
Does he have the ability to do that?
I believe so. He could make that a stipulation of federal contracts, at least during his presidency.
Because that's the one.
If they want to go to court, that one I'm pretty sure he could secure.
Yeah, because I look at this and we're at this weird moment. I mean, we've been watching what happened at Amazon. There's going to be, a couple of hearings, I guess, on May 7th to start talking about the unfair labor charges that our WDSU is bringing forth. This seems like the right time for this moment, in my view. Had you stuck to the infrastructure plan, had you stuck to the jobs, and to that would have been a powerful movement forward. And the one thing that I'm a little frustrated at right now, and he's obviously not done, he has not mentioned that today is Workers' Memorial Day.
Right. Yeah, when you came to Wisconsin, did you get to Milwaukee, or was it just the?
We just made it to Madison.
Okay, because we erected in Zeidler Union Square in Milwaukee. Oh man, that must be about 30 years ago. A workers' memorial, a memorial to workers who died on the job,
right.
Basically.
No, when I was taking classes at the Labor College in Silver Spring, we helped build a workers' memorial there. It's now the campus of the Amalgamated Transit Union. And I believe they still maintain that workers' memorial there in Silver Spring.
Yeah, one of the things that was striking, and this takes us back many years, more American workers were killed on the job in this country during the Vietnam War years than there were Americans killed in Vietnam. That's the kinds of figures. People that was pre-OSHA in many ways, and let's hope we never return to that, but it remains the case that too many die on the job.
No, and this is where, tying this all together with the pandemic, because look, he took credit for what they did logistically to get vaccination sites up. There's, according to him, a vaccination site within 5 miles of 90% of the people in this country, which is great work. Good on you. It's what we should have been doing right from the start. But you should have been talking about how we didn't take care of workers during the pandemic and how we didn't use OSHA properly and why we needed unions. I mean, there's so much to this. If I was writing this speech, it'd have been a different speech.
Yeah, guaranteed. And by the way, I would have paid to be able to help write this speech, because I think that's how eager I was for him to do it right, that I thought maybe if I could get him to do a little more FDR in there, it would be all the better. By the way, can I brag a little bit? You mentioned Amazon before.
By all means.
The state of New York has taken Amazon to court for its practices,
right.
and especially the cases in Staten Island where Chris Smalls was involved. My daughter is an assistant attorney general in the state of New York. She is leading the case against Amazon.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Good for her. And look, we absolutely need to start doing some of that. In fact, we had Chris Smalls on the program not too long ago. I guess it's been about a couple of months, talking about how bad things were there and the treatment that's gone on there. And to me, this is that moment. This was that battle cry that I think that this speech really should have been around. It's about jobs. It's about employment. Yes. It's about getting the economy back. It's about rolling up those sleeves and getting the work and focus solely on that. All that other stuff, we know you're on board with. We know you're going to get there, but a little too muddled in my view.
Yeah, maybe he should have just built the entire thing around American workers. And in fact, he could have started off with that great Lincoln quote. How to go? Labor is before capital. Labor deserves the greater attention, that kind of thing. It would have been a great opening, the more I think about it.
Yeah, labor is superior to capital, because
you know what I'm talking
about.
Without
I had
labor,
it
written down, but it's
you would have basically got nothing. But I think tomorrow what you're going to see is I think the big line look, there's nothing wrong with standing with the LGBT community, but the whole the transgender thing. I've got your back. That's going to be what's remembered tomorrow. And again, I think all of the things this is what the right-wing spin machine is going to spend their time on, deluding people and distracting people with, when the economic policies that he was talking about is going to help everybody in this country. What we're going to hear about tomorrow is, Joe Biden wants every child to be transgender. I'm waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, that'll be the right-wing thing. Here's the question I have. Let's hypothesize what we'll hear on the likes of the pseudo-liberal, decidedly neocon MSNBC. Okay, what do you think you'll hear there? You think you'll hear anything about the PRO Act, about the imperative of enacting the PRO Act, or even CNN? What are they going to say? They'll ask Santorum, what do you think about what you heard last night?
No, you're right. There'll be nothing about the PRO Act. They'll stick with the infrastructure plan. They'll stick with talking about the green thing. Maybe we won't have. Maybe we'll have to drink plant-based beer again. Maybe that's coming back. No more burgers for you, Harvey. No more.
That's great. Sorry.
But this is the sad state of where we are. I look at his speech and I saw some good things. There's some policy. Exactly there's some good policy. There's some good ideas. Rebuilding our economy, spending money on education, money on healthcare, helping the working class of this country that's been struggling for so long and has been abused for so long. Finally, someone saying, "Hey, we can. There's help coming." But there wasn't that like you said, that call to action to, hey, Joe Manchin, call his office, call Christian Cinema, call Mark Kelly, call Mark Warner, get on the phones early, often, and push them. Tell them you demand them to follow through on this. There wasn't that. He didn't call anybody out. In fact, he did the nice thing to Mitch McConnell. Hey, Mitch, thanks. It was touching. You named the cancer bill after my son. That was such a nice thing. Great. But is that going to help us move anything forward? No, not a bit. And in fact, the other thing he did is I'm pretty sure I think it was around the time I left to come and talk to you. He had moved into the whole question of Afghanistan and the war on terror and all of that. Great. But do that on another occasion. Yeah. Don't do it now. Because what'll happen is people will walk away. What they heard last is what they'll remember. Okay. And the other stuff, it'll just be part of the mishmash that they recollect. It should have been a 30-minute speech, tops. Should have got in there. He got the greatest hits. I mean, he started off good. We were in crisis. We have opportunity. That's it. We came from crisis. We got opportunity. Here's the opportunity. We're going to rebuild the infrastructure for the future. We're going to get kids better educated. We're going to get jobs for workers. Bang, done. Right. And every one of those workers will have an opportunity to participate in organizing a labor union. Can't say that enough. No, I'm right there with you. The fact that you're going to have good if I don't think he used the word solidarity. I would have liked him to throw that in too. Yeah, I don't think that's in his speech patterns. I think he's an old school labor guy who just it is just one of those things. I don't think that's his word. So I'm not surprised that he doesn't use it. But the fact that he did come out with a look, the Wall Street didn't build this country. The working people did. And those unions built a middle class. And he hit on something I think is also important. He said that the American Jobs Plan will be the biggest increase in non-defense research and development on record. And he basically goes into saying, look, technological change is coming. And this is a spot he could have spent a little more time on even, because he's saying, look, the kind of change we're going to see in the next 10 years is more than we've seen in the last 50. So we've got to be kind of moving. We got to start moving now to get prepared, get people the education they need. This is one of those things, again, back to the economy, in my view. Yeah, but let's reassure, but I would have also, if he was going to really push that strongly, is reassure people they will not all be displaced by robots. And if they are, we have to figure that out. Well, yeah. I bet if we reduce working people's terribly long days to a 6-hour workday. Yeah, stop dreaming, Harvey. We can't do anything like that. People would be bored. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves. Oh, yeah. I can tell you how many people I know in Wisconsin would love to go fishing some more. No, I might even take up fishing. Doubt it, but I might. Yeah. The other thing that I caught my attention is he said, America's back, and the rest of the world's asking for how long. And I think that's an honest question. because
Yes.
the rest of the world's looking at us going, are you insane? You had that last guy who was really bad. And there's the possibility of, especially after the news yesterday of the reapportionment, we're seeing a shift of 7 more seats, going south. Could be problems in the next election, 2, 3.
Well, somehow the Democrats better figure out how to turn Texas blue, okay? And I can tell you, the only maybe better news was the fact that maybe some of those Californians had moved to Washington and Oregon. You know, I saw they picked up, didn't they, up above?
Oregon did, yeah.
Yeah, I will say, by the way, that the Californians I know, and I've only been to California a few times, but all the Californians I know, I think they've been cheated. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were, given the way in which Trump handled the census.
No, I don't doubt it. And this is another one of those things where you just go, amazing how they continue to do this kind of stuff. So
I was just glad Wisconsin, we didn't lose a seat. And now the only question is, can we ever take back the seats we deserve if given the way in which the Republicans have stolen the district mapping?
Yeah, the gerrymandering is a bad thing. I mean, at the end of this, all of the things that he laid out tonight, all of the policy that he talked about, and there was a lot. And even for me, who's someone who follows this stuff, that was a lot. You don't get the seats. You don't get any of this stuff done. And
yeah,
I would
let's hope. Yeah, it would have been better if he focused on what we talked about before, and then returned in 2 weeks from now to the question of the right to vote in America. That in itself deserved a good 30-minute address to Americans and how they can make sure they don't lose their right to vote. And people need to understand it isn't only those other folks, as too many people think about it, who may not have their right to vote. It's a lot of folks in all their diversity who may well find themselves done out of their ability to vote, because people are setting it up so that rural folk who come in every hue of American life, they're going to be done out of voting places. A lot of places are going to suffer the loss of the right to vote.
Well, they're already saying that not everyone should be allowed to vote. They're already saying we want better voters. We want more qualified voters. I'm already seeing the right-wing spin on this. So last question I've got for you. So overall, we missed about 5 minutes of the end. What kind of, you give him a grade? You're the professor.
On the speech itself, a B-.
A B-, okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to say a C because it just got so much, but there were points along the way which, if they figure out how to take them and project them, then it will have been worthwhile. Otherwise, it's somewhere, B-, B, C, because he made the right points. He just made too many of them.
No, I was giving him a solid C, so you were above me. So good. I see we're in the same ballpark. But Harvey, as always, I appreciate the time. Fun talking with you, my friend.
Good to see you. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Harvey Kaye. Seriously, I like Joe Biden. I like him a lot. Not so much on this was a little bit long. Love to hear your thoughts. Did you get to pay attention? Did you get to see it? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
The gap between what we are doing and what actually needs to be done is widening by the second.
New climate targets still not enough to close the emissions gap. Republicans' infrastructure proposal about 1/5 the size of Biden's. Plus,
say goodbye to your burgers. In order to help hit the Biden administration's climate goals, a limit of 4 pounds of red meat per year or a single average-sized burger every month.
Fox News forced to admit Biden's climate plans do not ban red meat.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
A graphic and a script incorrectly implied that it was part of Biden's plan for dealing with climate change. That is not the case.
The Green News Report would like to apologize. We referred to Fox News as news. That is not the case. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, so Fox News spent all weekend long freaking out about Joe Biden canceling meat.
With maximal outrage.
And it turns out it's not true at all.
Nope.
Who could have guessed it?
But we'll have more on that in a moment. So, jobs and clean energy were the central focus of President Joe Biden's two-day virtual climate summit last week, attended by some 40 world leaders, business executives, labor union heads. Biden pledged to cut U.S. emissions 50% by 2030 under the Paris Climate Agreement and reach net zero emissions by 2050, calling climate action an unprecedented opportunity to create millions of jobs transitioning to clean energy.
And canceling meat.
No. Scientists say it's achievable with existing technology, but it'll be a very heavy lift. A new report by Europe's Climate Action Tracker calculates that even with the new, more ambitious pledges announced by the United States and other countries, it is still not enough to meet the Paris targets. And the world is way off track to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050 to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, unless countries pick up the pace of emissions cuts.
Uh-oh. Or if they cancel meat.
A different study from the European Commission's Joint Research Center finds that there's also a huge discrepancy between what the world's nations say they emit in greenhouse gases each year versus the amount of emissions that independent organizations have calculated using independent models. The gap is roughly equal to the annual emissions of the United States.
Uh-oh.
The researchers warn that the accounting discrepancy will complicate the already difficult task of pinpointing just how much and how fast nations must cut greenhouse gas pollution. Here in the U.S., congressional Republicans unveiled their own infrastructure counter-proposal to Biden's American Jobs Plan. Biden proposes to spend $2.2 trillion over 10 years repairing the nation's infrastructure, upgrading for climate impacts, and shifting to cleaner, safer, renewable energy. Republicans' infrastructure proposal is about one-fifth of that, a little over $560 billion.
And I'm guessing there's nothing in it at all about the climate.
Nope.
But they protect burgers, I hope.
Right-wing media began lying about Biden's climate proposals right off the bat, and it demonstrates the right-wing propaganda cycle. They highlighted a year-old, totally unrelated study that suggests that one way to help reduce emissions would be reducing consumption of red meat. The UK's Daily Mail then baselessly speculated that Biden would ban red meat, and then Fox News and right-wing media ran with that lie so Republicans could denounce the imaginary policy. Fox News did not retract that story for 3 days.
Well, you have to have something to be angry about if you're Fox News or Republican.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration is moving quickly. The Environmental Protection Agency and the Transportation Department have both rescinded a Trump-era attempt to strip the state of California of its special authority to set its own vehicle tailpipe emissions and pollution standards. Both agencies announced Monday they will restore California's right to set climate limits on cars and SUVs, which many car makers, like General Motors, have already announced that they're going to shift to all-electric vehicles by 2035.
Oh, how nice of them. Instead of Republicans trying to use big government to leverage against small states, the Biden administration is actually letting states do what they please when it comes to limiting carbon emissions.
Finally, Swedish teen climate activist Greta Thunberg testified to the House Oversight Committee on Earth Day. With her characteristic bluntness, Thunberg correctly criticized the pledges made by countries so far as insufficient and delivered a stark warning to those who would delay action.
You still have time to do the right thing and to save your legacies. But that window of time is not going to last for long. We, the young people, are the ones who are going to write about you in the history books. We are the ones who get to decide how you will be remembered. So my advice for you is to choose wisely.
Oh, man. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Choose wisely. This has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the speech is all wrapped up, all done. You've got Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, giving his rebuttal. And as I said, look, at the end of it, I'm going with a C so far on the speech. Kind of lost me, way too much in it, and I don't think there was a big call to action. But here to share some thoughts is the veteran of many State of the Union speeches. Here to give us some thoughts on the president's words. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick. We're going to reverse roles here. I'm a definite B minus, maybe B.
Oh, you're going that high? Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me why.
I'll go the B minus. It's the old political hat. I'll compromise, okay, between B and C. First of all, I thought his style was fantastic. I really do. He was calm, but yet was aggressive about the issues, that he was talking about. He hit time after time, of course, unions right out front.
Had me there.
Right out front about the union workers. A lot of the speech was about the economy and people, working people. I did like the fact that he just directly laid it out on the line about the top of the food chain, the 1%, and how he was going to pay for his programs. I like that. Now, I do agree. I think he fit so much into it that because I remember Bill Clinton's speech, I think it was back in 90, maybe 95, when he leaned forward from the teleprompter and we all went, uh-oh. And he went on for, I think, an hour and 45 minutes or something, one of the longest speeches, and had a lot in it. But I think there was probably, they tried to cover everything. I think there was a bit, honestly, too much in it.
Way too much.
I will say that, because you do lose some people. I mean, it's kind of our job to pay attention to everything. I thought it was very, very interesting, one part of this, towards the final part of the speech, when he talked about race, but he made it very clear about, men and women in uniform, and he got a definite round of applause from the Democratic side also on that.
No, look, I'm not anti-police. I never have been.
Yep.
I support the police when they're not wrong. I think that's the sane, the rational. I think that's the position that we should be pursuing.
And he did that. He didn't just mention one side of an issue or one aspect because it's so complicated. And I thought that was very good what he did. Now, out front, he also, whether people completely agree with him or not, he basically out front made the gist of his speech that the government can grow and the government is here to do something to help in lives versus what you've had even from Bill Clinton forward about less government. This was not a less government speech.
No, my C grade is not on going through and picking all the stuff. It's just it was too much.
I agree with you on that. That I agree. They had everything in the world in there.
Yeah, it's like someone had a checkoff list, and we had to fit. And then there was the rapid fire. Had to get a couple of things in real quick. You could have left that out. We know where you are, Joe.
I agree with you on that.
Stick with the economy. Hey, we're just coming out of the pandemic. Let's deal with one crisis. I love the way he started. Crisis, opportunity. We're coming out of a crisis. We're moving to opportunity. This is going to be good. And bang, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what our government is going to do to help facilitate that opportunity. I think had we stuck with that, this would have been a B plus A minus. This would have, because he's never going to be Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. Your delivery, you're never getting the bang. You're never getting that. Content-wise, like the content, it was too much.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I do agree on how much content was there because I actually had predicted this morning when I did a couple stations, I predicted that it would be on about five major areas. And he covered the gambit. I must say that.
Yeah, like I said, they had the checklist. They had to go bang, 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 bang all the way through. Now, some of the stuff he covered early, I thought were great. And it's the fact, like I said, the crisis opportunity, the jobs plan is a blue collar blueprint to build America. I love that. That's the bumper sticker right there.
It was good.
And the $15 for federal contractors, no one working 40 hours should live in poverty. That's fabulous. Talking about research and the largest non-military increase in research spending to move our economy forward. All of that stuff, fabulous. And then it should have ended there with a call to call your senators. They're in the way of this. All of this progress that we're talking about, all of this opportunity that I want to bring you is going to be stopped at the water's edge because of bang, 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 call them tomorrow.
Now, on that issue, as you know, he did say, hey, I don't want to be confrontational with the Senate. He actually said that, not something like not meaning to be confrontational. So he did tap dance around that one.
No, I mean, I think you got to come right out and call names. You got to know who's who. Because, the thing that gets me is, and this is where I thought this speech, if you're talking about unity, you go for that middle stuff. You go for that stuff that we're gonna draw people together and say, yeah, I want those jobs. Yeah, we need to rebuild our economy. Yeah, we need to invest in education. Because I've been talking about the mandatory 2 more years of education for 15 years doing this show. I've been saying for the longest time, we need to have an associate's degree coming out of high school or a VOTEC training certificate coming out of high school. We need to have that training, and it needs to be mandatory, not something people have to bargain for or spend a lifetime of savings on. And I like that he hit that. I think if you'd have stuck to that stuff and with a call to order, get people calling, marching, I think that would have been better.
Now, and what he could have done, and I thought this as he gave the speech because I've been in those States of the Union speeches, and I can recall presidents basically alluding to get on the train or it's going to, run you over.
Right.
And I've heard several presidents, go in that direction. What I think he could have done, which he didn't, and I was a little bit surprised, is to just lay it out very clearly and say, I've had you to the White House, the other side of the aisle. I've reached out. We're reaching out. My chief of staff's been over to the Capitol, which he has, McLean has, and he could have said, "Now I need from you a response. Come on. We need to do this together. I need a response from you." I think he could do that,
yeah,
and he didn't because there hasn't been a response.
No, and that's the thing. Now, here's my concern. My concern is that the Republicans have offered a very scaled back. Only hard physical infrastructure plan that I don't think is going to really do anything to boost the economy and get us in the right direction. I fear that's all we get out of this, and we're 6 months down the road still asking for bipartisanship.
In fact, I think the Republicans were not smart in what they offered. I know the president's infrastructure plan is divided into 4 parts.
Right.
I understand the 4 different parts. Well, I'm sorry, 3 of the parts can be debatable, or maybe 2 major, but 3 of them can be debatable. The infrastructure part itself historically doesn't have debate. That's the roads, the bridges, et cetera, the railways. And I think, if anything, the Republicans should have been smarter, and instead of saying, oh, okay, we're okay with $600 billion, they should have definitely upped that in a big way, and then picked apart parts of the plan that they didn't like in the other extraneous areas, as they call them.
No, I'm with you. So last question I've got for you on the State of the Union before we move along. Tomorrow morning on all the right-wing shows, what's going to be the lead?
Oh, I can tell you. Socialism. Socialism.
Going to be socialism? It's not going to be that Joe Biden's got all the transgender people's back?
Nope. Socialism.
Socialism?
It's going to be pure socialism. The government's going to run every aspect of your life. He's going to get your guns, too. You got to throw that in. But it's going to be socialism, pure and simple, that he found a solution to everything in this country through the government taking control of your lives. That's the message tomorrow.
As opposed to what my grandparents' generation built, which was
right.
Government as a partner in setting the playing field so that we can do better. you're going full on, this is government ownership, you're all going to be slaves? Or is the meme that we talked about yesterday, you can vote socialism in, but you got to shoot your way out?
Yeah, right. It's that's going to be the theme, I predict to you.
All right, I'm gonna look for it, and I don't doubt that you are absolutely correct. So let's move on. Today, the big news, obviously, Rudy. The FBI, I guess, raided his apartment and his office, looking for some electronic devices on his dealings with Ukraine. Thoughts?
Well, Rudy Giuliani, how he has survived from when he was with and I love to beat this drum, I know it, but when he actually took money from the Mujahideen cult, which was at that time, it's not now, an official terrorist group, from that day forward, years back, when a lot of people lost faith in him and he became the money guy, the go-to guy. Then the Trump administration, error after error after error. I mean, I'm not surprised. I don't know that he'll be jailed, but I will tell you this. It's very possible he will lose, for what it's worth, his law license. I think that, is very possible. But he might face some criminal charges.
Yeah, I got to be honest. After his showing as Trump's lawyer, I don't know that he needs to lose his license, because I don't know anybody's going to ever hire him again.
Maybe they should investigate where he got his license. Possibly,
At one point, he was a good lawyer. I had people today telling me, he took down the mob. Yeah, only to turn into a mob guy.
He did. I mean, in his day, it's what I said. I used to follow him. I thought he was the nation's mayor, and then when he got out of office, when we started to see some of the things he was doing in the path he was going down, then he got with Trump administration was on steroids on this stuff, But I think the fact that they raided his apartment, I think, is a big deal. It's not something just that kind of raid required top of the food chain authorization from the DOJ, Department of Justice. Top of the food chain.
Now, what do you say to the people? Because I had a couple of folks tell me that this is illegal. He was Trump's lawyer. There's lawyer-client privilege. That they're breaking the law. My argument back was, well, that's potentially true. But if you're part of the crime, if you're a criminal too, I don't think you get protection then.
Well, yes. Look, they are not going into his apartment or his office or residence, wherever they go to, because of some connection that he had as a lawyer to the president. They have been looking at him since 2019, and what they specifically have been looking is did he engage in undisclosed foreign lobbying for Ukrainian officials? And that was when he tried to get the ouster of the United States ambassador to the Ukraine.
Right.
And then there was indictments of two of his associates on campaign finance charges with what they had, the straw donor scheme. Now, he is facing some legal problems with Dominion, but, I think that's a whole separate issue. So what they're looking at on Giuliani is it has nothing to do with the fact that he is the president's lawyer. He has no immunity on that. None.
Right.
It wasn't up to the Trump administration to tell him whether to report and register as a foreign agent.
Well, good times. My thought is Rudy got a lot of money from the Mujahideen cult, I'm sure, and that's going to go to funding a legal team. Hopefully, someone better than Sidney Powell or the rest of the Trump team.
Right.
And the massive lawsuits from the two voting machine companies going to keep him busy a while. So I don't know that we're going to have to worry about him too much longer. I did want to get your thoughts, though, on the stories coming out of India. I know you're someone who travels to India quite often, and you're very fond of the country. They're getting slammed right now by this virus. Thoughts?
I talked to three different people in India, in three different parts of India today, and it's absolutely horrific. Look, Indian government's reporting 200,000. It's anywhere from 2 to 5 times that amount. It could be 500,000. It could be 1 million people. And that makes sense to India's reporting statistics. It's not an advanced country in a lot of ways, only in some of the larger cities. Modi, the prime minister, has had events, and there's been some criticism of that. A lot of people have not paid attention to the spacing, but not just blaming the people. It's also the leadership, the lack of preparation of bringing in vaccines. Now we're offering to help in different parts of the world, but India is in a big train wreck over this, and it's very, very tragic, and it's growing as we speak, day after day. Also, it's not getting attention, but Africa's in a bad situation. But India is getting the attention right now as one of the countries that's worse in the world. So hopefully, other countries, United Nations, will be able to help out.
Yeah, but isn't this? I was listening to some reports today that that we're kind of holding back on India, and I'm like, India's kind of an ally, right?
Well, we did. In fact, what ended up happening to break the logjam, we were holding back on some different raw materials that they need to, gear up the vaccines. And the alternative to our defense secretary in India called our defense secretary and reminded him that when we needed medicine last year, India shipped medicine over to us. And that in itself kind of broke the logjam. Yeah, there's a fear, and there has been a fear, and the Biden administration had held back somewhat because, take care of Americans. But I think we all know that the vaccines are out there, getting out there enough that, it's time that we can help India.
Right, because from what I understand, we've purchased like 1.2 billion doses of him.
Correct.
And we have 340 million people?
Right.
So
I think we can. I think that the political criticism, the administration can withstand that, and I think they're starting to, free it up because they have been hesitant to do something based on, quote, taking care of America first. But again, India sent us medicine last year when we asked for it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Now, I had heard an interesting thing. You said, the vaccines for them right now is not the problem. They've got to get the treatments. They've got to get the protective gear. They've got to do that stuff first. Because if you're getting the virus, the vaccine doesn't really matter. You're not going to get people vaccinated fast enough to stop this skyrocketing number of people getting it. You've got to do all the other things first.
Yes, there's a whole series. Excuse me. It's like a package of problems they have, and including 1.2 billion people, obviously, masks. They're out of oxygen in a lot of cases. People are just literally laying on the street dying, and they need oxygen supply. So there's, ventilators. There's multiple things that needs to be done for India.
Well, we'll see how this plays out. Finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on the I'm looking at the comments from Tucker Carlson last night. Again, and telling people to call Child Protective Services on parents who have kids wearing masks and this whole our freedom nonsense. Now you were a member of the Republican Party for a long time. You used to be the party of freedom and liberty and individual personal responsibility and all that stuff. My mind went to the place of what happened to that party. When did they now start to become, that?
Well, it's so driven by the Fox news pundits and entertainment pundits, I'll say it that way. And, when Tucker Carlson urges people like he did to call, you're right, Child Protective Services report if a child's wearing a mask outdoors, he says that should be illegal. And I think what has to happen, the party itself just needs to make, the statements that are appropriate, which is, we need to space, we need to have masks. And by the way, that's a parent's decision if they want their child to have a mask on.
No, more than anything, you need to mind your own damn business.
It's right. I mean, if he's truly, conservative, let the parents make the decision. They're not doing something of harm to the child. That's up to them.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out when.
It's theatrics. It's theatrics.
I guess
on his part.
Yeah, but he's supposed to be the conservative, mouthpiece. That's where the ideology is supposed to come from. That's what trickles down.
Right.
Crazy times.
It's a very, very different time we live in.
Yeah, most certainly. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff, my friend.
You too. Thank you.
Bob Ney, Look, I don't know when they lost their minds. I really don't. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the American Federation of Hosiery Workers merged with the Textile Workers Union of America. Hosiery workers had begun organizing as early as 1909. By 1923, the American Federation of Full Fashion Hosiery Workers, as the union was originally called, had affiliated with the American Federation of Labor. Women made up the majority of those employed in the industry. Competition within the industry was fierce and a major focus for the early union. From its founding, the union was known for its progressive stances. It focused not only on contracts, but also on social welfare programs such as pensions and health insurance. During the Great Depression in 1933, the union pushed for the founding of a low-rent housing project in Philadelphia. The result was the Carl Mackley Houses, a subsidized governmental housing project. The union operated a nursery school for residents of Carl Mackley and the surrounding community. When the Congress of Industrial Organizations broke off from the AFL, the Hosiery Union left with them as part of the Textile Workers Organizing Committee. In the spring of 1937, Pennsylvania hosiery workers held a sit-down strike. The strike was led by Emil Raid, a Polish-American worker who had joined the union when he was only 15 years old. The strike grew to include 50,000 workers and shut down the Pennsylvania hosiery industry. The workers won raises between 8 and 10%. In 1947, the hosiery workers decided that they did not want to pay the dues increase required by the CIO. They left the organization and re-affiliated with the AFL. Finally, in 1965, changes in the industry led the union to merge with the Textile Workers Union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, taking some shots over my grading of Joe Biden's speech. And look, I love the content. I think the policy is right. I think it was too long. I think we should have focused on a narrow, get the economy moving, the crisis opportunity thing. Had he stuck to crisis opportunity, get people back to work, we need this investment, pushing his agenda, it would have been out of the park. But then got into the laundry list where we now got to start ticking off every box, where it's not, look, we know you're going to get to all the other things on the box. But it's about staying focused on, at least for me. I know everybody wanted their little piece of what, their pet project, because a lot of folks are cause heads, and that's my cause. Hey, mention my cause. Instead of saying, hey, you know what? How do we get the entire country moving? And that's how we bring more people into the big tent, rebuild the economy, rebuild the infrastructure, and then start moving into the rest of the stuff. People are a lot more malleable when they're okay, when they're going to be able to support their family, when they're going to be able to put food on the table. But overall, as I said, I'm not unhappy with the speech. There was lots of good stuff in there. My problem was too much to digest. And I think Bob Ney's right. We're going to hear a lot about socialism tomorrow. I still think the transgender thing is going to get a lot of play. And look, he had to make that statement because that's another one of those boxes that has to be checked off. Even though we knew where he was all along. It's going to be the socialism thing. And the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm getting ready mentally for it. when the reality is all he was talking about is returning to things how he grew up, with a government that was there to be a partner and to help, recreating that safety net. But overall, I think it was a good speech. Love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the big speech. Got a Clinton-era speechwriter coming on to share some thoughts. Going to be interesting. And we got a lot of mobilization to do to get the policy moving. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.